Good morning. Uh, I'm Hayden Peacock. I'm here with my brother. I'll let him introduce himself.
My name is Zach Peacock. I'm Hayden's brother by a couple of years older.
He's just a little older than me. So earlier this year, I had to write a paper on something about that had something that affected Utah pretty dramatically. Um, and I decided to write on suicide. But I felt that I wanted to change it up a little bit and do more of a podcast format and just kind of talk about some of the topics I actually found throughout my research for this draft.
Okay. Yeah, you sent me your essay and I was able to read over it. Um, I thought it was a pretty good essay to begin with. One of the things that I was looking at was, I found it really interesting all the different statistics that you were able to find, especially the ones talking about, the average age um, of the kids. I would say kids here in Utah
Yeah,
that struggle with this issue. On your essay, you noted in 2018 that there was a study um, that said ages 10 to 17 were the most common um, to struggle with this issue. That's kind of interesting, huh?
yeah, that's pretty young age. The mind from 10 to 17 is really trying to develop at that age. So it's pretty interesting to see that kids at such a young age are trying to take their life, you know. Um,
Right, when they've only lived 10 to 15% of their life. They're not.
yeah, like that.
Yeah.
Such a young age to do something like that, to make that decision.
Hmm.
So, it,
Let's see. There was another statistic in here that I thought was pretty interesting. Um, that Utah is one of the bigger states to actually look at this problem and try to make some type of effect on it. Is that true? That they've been able to decrease their suicide rate over a certain period of time? I can't see it in the essay, but I do see a statistic talking about it closer
so
towards the end.
Utah did decrease their suicide rate just a little bit. I'm trying to see if I have the year here. If I don't, then I can
Yeah.
leave it in a comment down underneath for the year. But yeah, so they decreased the suicide rate from 22.7% to 22.2 percent per 100,000 people. I mean that's a little decrease in that year change, but they were never to really figure out what the main reason for that decrease was.
Okay.
There was no pattern for it. It was just kind of like a random decrease.
Interesting. So it might not be the best statistic, but it is a statistic that shows that Utah is to effect trying to do something. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
which is better than them not acknowledging it at all. So then, what I'd want to go into next was, we were kind of talking about the 10 to 17 year olds, and that being a pretty common age range here in Utah. Back when we were 10, there were some of these distractions that these kids have now that we didn't have to an extent. Because of our age, we were right on the cusp of all of the. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fire. All the technology being innovated, like when we were young, we didn't have cell phones, but by the time we were 14 or 15, we did. So we're kind of at an
Yeah.
interesting age where we kind of got to see both sides of
You know,
that.
I kind of feel like we were at that age where we were able just to kind of like dip our toes in the water of technology. We weren't born right into it, just thrown into it, thrown right into our faces. Kind
R-
of we got a little test, figured out what it is, kind of understood a little bit more. Some of these younger kids just got it thrown right at them, and that's all they want to do is technology right now.
right from the time that they pretty much are able to hold a phone or able to hold a iPad, they're using these devices, and whether or not that has any type of correlation with what we're talking about, we could look deeper into that, but you would have to say that just for face value, looking at the generations now compared to, you know, our generation probably being one of the last generations all the way back to somebody like our grandparents where they didn't even have colored televisions when they were 15 years old. So, the influence is greater than today than it was, 50 years ago. And it's not like 50 years ago they didn't have technology. They just didn't have this instantaneous technology that we have now.
Yeah, no, I think you hit that spot on. Um, I did talk about, I did interview my grandpa uh, when I
Yeah.
did this project because I wanted to see, what a main difference was um, between us, our generation, and their generation. And he said that suicide really just wasn't around that much, or it wasn't focused on that much when he was younger. Um, but now it has spiked over the past I don't know 50 years or so. Um, then do we know the reason why? I
Right.
honestly don't. I honestly don't know. Like we can throw out all these factors and try to see what it is, but I don't know what it would be.
Right. And I think when you're talking about, comparing the last 50 years, a big part of it is just the ability for our generation today um, to be able to look at and scrutinize a lot of the data too. So, maybe the percentage um, is increasing,
Yeah,
but maybe there was a base percentage that was never looked at 50 years ago. You know
that's true.
that.
Yeah, the technology we have today
Yeah,
to to track that makes it easy, but back then it might not have been.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
far greater now, and I think the other thing you get is, um, you know, we have the news at our fingertips. We have a lot of things that we're able to look at, and it may have been the same in the past, but today we can now look at it and actually identify what's going on just because we're not unable to see things, you know. Um,
yeah,
and that just comes with the increased communication. 50 years ago, you were sending letters back and forth between countries or between wherever. And today, I can FaceTime somebody in another country and have a conversation with them.
yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
those are just kind of things to think about. And then the other thing I was looking over on your essay, your original text was you're kind of talking about, you know, um, emotions versus depression. So, are things that these young people are feeling really emotions or are they really depression? I would say that this topic is probably a lot deeper than just a couple more minutes of talking about it. But I would also say that, it's a good thing to talk about because some things
the
are emotional, and not just depression, especially when you're so young. You have doctors and adults and teachers really talking about over medicating these young people, because they can't really define it. Is it emotions or is it just depression? What do you think about that?
Well, the feeling of depression and the feeling of sadness are they're pretty similar feelings in a person.
Yeah.
They're pretty hard to distinguish the two apart. Sadness, sadness is temporary. It can be fixed, through time. But depression is something that maybe something in your earlier life that had happened multiple times, and now that you're a little bit older, it just you see something that reminds you about it. So it's always staying in the back of your mind. Depression stays for a lot longer than sadness does, um, and
Right.
it makes it hard to tell the difference between the two.
No, definitely. And I think, some of the time, um, people just they confuse the two, or they're not educated on either or. I don't know. I know that it's definitely a complex topic, but in the world that we live in today, I can see how it's very easy to be misguided in the difference, just because something happens temporarily, like you said, doesn't mean it's going to last forever. Whereas when you start looking into real depression, depression can be defined as a chemical imbalance in the brain, in the body. And that stuff's definitely serious, but that's when the question becomes, well, what are these 10 to 17-year-olds potentially doing to their mental state or to their bodies that are putting them in a position where they feel depressed, or constantly unhappy, because they might compare the two together and think they're the same. But I would say that there's probably some type of factor in place.
Yeah,
When we were younger, we definitely played video games when they came out, but we spent a lot of time outdoors, playing outside, having fun, being kids. And now, if you completely change the climate from just 15 years ago, you have kids unable to go outside, being afraid that they're going to get sick. So, it'll be interesting to see what these rates look like 10 years from
yeah,
now for the people that are suffering from these social injustices now. Just
yeah.
because, you thought it was
You're right.
bad.
It will.
You thought 5 years
Yeah,
was bad, and everybody could do whatever they wanted. I mean, now you got kids afraid of being outside because,
yeah.
uh, you know,
They just, yeah,
they're told
yeah,
so. So,
yep.
I think that definitely there's a lot of factors, but social
It'll be
media,
interesting to see what happens in the next 20 years with the rates of suicide, and to see what uh, takes place and what people try to do to fix the issue, not only in Utah but around the United States and even around the world.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so
I mean, we've definitely your essay and topic was definitely on, Utah in general, but I do, just like you were saying, it's something that's widespread. Utah's pretty interesting just based off of, the demographics and the people here, that we get such high suicide rates. But, I don't think anybody really has an answer to that. Um, it's just these problems that society has to deal with, and the society here definitely struggles with it.
yes, yep,
Well, cool. Well,
yeah. So
thanks,
thank you
Hayden.
for
Yeah,
yeah, no, thank you for helping me out on this and
yeah.
talking about it and all that good stuff.
I'm glad that we could talk about it and that we'll be able to put this thing up and let people listen about it. Definitely an important topic, and thank you for being on.
Yeah, no, thank you. You have a good one, Zach.
You too. Thanks, Aid.